Already opened up the air box, removed the filter, and I did have to loosen these two screws so I can pull this thing backwards. I decided to remove the carb working on the right-hand side of the machine. So first thing you want to do is turn that fuel line off because you are going to be disconnecting that. There is a screw that will allow you to take the carb off of the air box here, so you can pull that out. The other thing is you can kind of see it here where it mounts to the engine. There's two 10mm bolts that you're going to want to remove. Once you've got those taken off, you're going to unscrew the top of the carburetor, and you can see I put the choke cable and the needle in a bag just to protect it from getting dirty. Once you've done that, you're going to pull the fuel line off, and then you can pull this piece back. You can pull this whole air box back once you've loosened those screws on top, and that will allow you to remove that carburetor. Okay, so this is the carb now removed, and I've got it oriented how it would be sitting on that right-hand side. So this is where the air box would be going into this side of the carb. I did unscrew the throttle cable, which seats down in here. And then first thing I'm noticing, so this is a flange that connects the front of the carburetor to the engine block. This seal, which fits in this groove here, was pretty much destroyed. So this could be where there was an air leak. So I did find an O-ring which fits really nicely in here. This O-ring, which seats here, is very flat, and so there could be a leak here. So I'm going to see if I can match this locally at O'Reilly's or the hardware store. Otherwise, I may be looking for a kit, a rebuild carb kit. So I'm going to see if I can find that O-ring, but just two things that I've noticed right away before I've even opened up the carb. All right, so using a Phillips screwdriver, I've removed the 3 bottom screws that are holding this assembly on the bottom. So now you can see the floats, and I'm going to be looking at the jets first. Everything actually looks pretty clean. I'm going to give it a blast of carb cleaner and wipe everything down, but I want to check the jets and make sure all the fine holes are indeed open. And then I'll check the float assembly to make sure it's functioning properly and look for any signs of anything being clogged. Again, the biggest thing that's jumped out at me so far is the condition of some of these gaskets, so I'm going to replace those. All right, so I've put the carburetor back together after cleaning everything. I did replace the O-ring on this flange that connects to the motor. I was not able to find a new O-ring that seats here. I cannot find a kit, and I ran around town looking for O-rings that are oil, gasoline resistant, but couldn't find anything. So I am a little worried that this gasket is just a little too flush, but I'm going to go ahead, put it back together, and put some silicone grease on this O-ring, see if I can get it to swell up a little bit. Might not work, but anyways, hopefully I'll get a tight fit. I did also find that the pilot screw, which is this guy right here, that is supposed to be tightened snug and then backed off 1.5 turns. So that is not how this screw was tuned, so I fixed that. It is now set at 1.5 turns counterclockwise from being snug. And so I'm going to put this all back together on the four-wheeler now. What I'm going to do, putting this carburetor back on, is to put this flange on the engine. It's going to be tilted down just a little bit where it meets the carburetor. I'm putting a little thread lock on each screw. Okay, so I've got the carburetor attached to the air intake boot. I've slid it over the screws to the flange leading to the engine block. I am going to put some thread lock on those screws. There's going to be one on each side right here. Then I will tighten those down. Also, I have inserted the throttle cable down into the housing and screwed that finger tight. So the fuel filter, just as a reminder, is going to slide on a little piece of metal here. And then this was kind of a pain in the butt, but using a needle nose pliers, I put the tension clip back on the rubber hose, slid it over, and then just used the pliers to move that into place. So the fuel line is now nice and snug. I'll go ahead and hook up the the tubing on the other side and we'll get this thing back together. Working on the left-hand side of the machine, I can see that this rubber hose is a little bit split. So I'm gonna trim a little bit off the end. This is the vent line that goes up, and it's just a little breather right here. Probably not super critical, but I'm just gonna trim the end of that and put that on to where it goes. Can't really see it, but I'm pointing to that little vent line that goes right there. Okay, with the vent tube attached there, the last thing to do is connect the choke cable. So remember, it's gonna run through a little clip here that holds it tight, and then you're just gonna lift this lever and then slide the bottom part of the wire into that clip and you'll be done. All right, just a shot of the carburetor with all of the tubes attached and the throttle as well as choke cable inserted properly. Now let's change our focus to cleaning up that spark plug. Then we will finish connecting the airbox and we should be good to test this baby. Okay, so I have downloaded the service manual for this DVX model. What I'm focused on here is the spark plug gap we want at a 0.6 to 0.7 or 24 to 28 thousandths of an inch.
Spark plug, so you can see that there's a lot of carbony soot built up, which makes me think that it was the fuel-air ratio which was off. But I've got a couple of different gappers here, and I am going to make sure that I'm going to clean it up with a piece of emery paper, make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'll make sure that we have that 24 to 28 thousandths of an inch gap on there, and I'll adjust as necessary.
I've got that in finger tight, and then just a little bit of tension with an 11/16. And now I will go ahead and put on the boot. She's all set. Now we'll put together this airbox. So here's the airbox for the DVX, and I have removed the air filter. I thought while I was doing this, I might as well clean this. So I have washed it with K&N cleaning solution, rinsed it with cold water, let it air dry overnight. Now I'm just gonna spray this thing with oil and then I will put it back in. Here's the air filter oil that I'm using now as I install it. Okay, so I did take it outside to spray it with the oil, but as you can see, what you're just trying to do is evenly spray the outside of this filter until you get kind of a pink coloring. And so that's the oil that's giving a little bit of a pink coloring. So just get it uniformly all over this air filter and then we'll go ahead and insert it. Newly cleaned and oiled filter installed. I also put a little Loctite on these two screws and then screwed those so the airbox is solid. Now I can go ahead and put the cover back on. I'm going to clean this up a little bit before I do that, and then we're going to start this guy up and see how. And before I forget, I did paint the heat shield that covers the exhaust pipe. I gave that a fresh coat of matte black heat resistant spray paint from Rust-Oleum. So I just put that on with the two bolts, and of course using some thread lock as all this vibrates. It does start, but I have to hit the throttle a little bit to keep it running. So I think the idle is a little too low. So I'll show you what I mean. It just won't stay on, so I'm going to adjust the idle screw. I did take it around the yard a few times, so it is warmed up. So if you are going to adjust your idle, you should try and drive around a little bit, get the engine warm when you find that sweet spot for the idle. I don't have a tachometer. I'm just going to go by feel on this one. Screw is right here. I'm going to turn it 360 degrees and start the engine. The engine dies of too low of an idle every time I take my finger off the throttle, so I'm going to do this sequentially and then keep starting it until I can get it to run constantly. Alright, so it did take a few times playing with that idle screw, twisting it about a quarter turn at a time and then running the engine, but we did find a sweet spot for the idle, so this machine is all set to go.